I was the family's worthless son until I bought the company that fired my dad and made him reapply for his old job, just to fire him on his first day. Every time my father looked at me, it was with disappointment. His eyes carried a silent verdict I'd heard 1,000 times before he even opened his mouth. He didn't need to say it, but he did anyway at the dinner table, at family gatherings, in front of my cousins, my uncles, even strangers. This one, he'd say, pointing a thumb at me like I was a smudge on his shirt, "He won't get anywhere. Didn't even finish college." His voice always had that bitter tone, like my very existence was a failed experiment. My older brother had a law degree framed above the fireplace. My sister ran a tech division for some global company. Every time someone visited, my dad would line up their accomplishments like trophies. But when it came to me, I was the afterthought, the footnote, the one who wasted his potential. I dropped out of school at 21, packed everything into a rusted pickup, and told them I had an idea, a vision. My dad had laughed so hard he actually cried. He told me to come back when I grew up. I never did. For 3 years, they didn't ask how I was living. I heard through my mom that my dad told people I was probably sleeping on someone's couch. He wasn't entirely wrong. I did sleep on a couch, but it was in an empty warehouse I'd converted into my first office. No heat, no insulation, just wires, scattered screens, and a mess of broken chairs. But it was mine. I worked 18 hours a day building a platform that solved a real problem for small logistics firms. I cold emailed CEOs, pitched without sleep, wrote every line of code myself, and launched the product to a market nobody thought to serve. First client came 6 months in. By the second year, I had 12. I never went back to my family home. I stopped picking up calls. I didn't need their words. I needed silence to build. One by one, I hired. I expanded. A venture fund backed me in year 3. We scaled faster than anyone expected. Suddenly, I was hosting strategy calls with companies I used to read about in magazines. I acquired a few firms to strengthen our backend. One of them, ironically, was a failing operations company run by old-school management. Turns out, they'd just let go of their longtime head of logistics, a man with a sharp tongue known for shouting in hallways and cutting corners. I knew the name before I even opened the file. Frank Miller. My father. He'd been laid off quietly after a string of compliance issues. Word was, he didn't take it well. Still thought he was indispensable. Still believed his experience made him untouchable. Apparently, he didn't realize the new board included me, or that I owned controlling interest through 2 shell entities. He applied again. Same company. Same job title. Same confidence. His resume came across my desk like it was any other. I didn't react. I didn't call anyone. I let the process play out. HR scheduled the interview. He walked in like he owned the place. Still wearing that smug smile he used when I brought home poor grades. Still using words like team captain and senior authority. The manager forwarded me his file with a note. Candidate was very persistent. Wants to start ASAP. Recommending hire for probationary basis. I approved it. His start date was Monday. I waited until he was settled into the same office he once used to boast about. He had no clue who ran the company now. The logo had changed. The leadership was anonymous on public filings. He didn't even recognize the framework we'd built. That morning, I walked in. He was sipping coffee mid-sentence, telling someone over the phone how he planned to get the team back in shape. He turned. He didn't recognize me at first. My hair was shorter, my beard fuller, and my suit didn't come off a clearance rack. But the second his eyes met mine, his face dropped like a shutter slamming shut. I stepped forward, calm, not angry, just ready. He tried to speak, but I raised a hand. Frank Miller, I said clearly, like I was calling out a name in a waiting room. You've been relieved of your position. Effective immediately. He blinked, confused. What? You're fired, I said, with the same measured tone he used the day he called me a disgrace. His mouth opened, no words came out. Just disbelief. I walked past him, sat at the desk, and pressed the intercom. Security will escort Mr. Miller out. He stood there like a man whose past had finally caught up. Because it had. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, I wasn't the worthless son anymore. I was the owner of the company that had once thrown him out. I didn't look back after I fired him. He stood there for a few seconds, stunned, not understanding how the balance had shifted so far and so fast. The man who used to run meetings with a raised voice and a quick temper now stood wordless, his grip tightening on a folder that suddenly meant nothing. Security came, and he didn't resist. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He walked out quietly, as if his entire past had collapsed in the space of one sentence. I sat down in his old chair, the one I'd given him back just long enough to take it away. It wasn't revenge for a single moment. It was a conclusion to years of silence, mockery, and distance. And I was done. 3 days passed. I didn't mention the incident to anyone. The staff moved on quickly. Most of them barely remembered him from the old days. He hadn't built lasting loyalty. His style was built on control, not connection. And once that control was gone, he faded into the background like dust brushed off a shelf. I signed off on the final termination paperwork without thinking twice. But my mother called the following weekend. She asked if I had seen him. Her tone didn't carry blame, but it carried confusion. She said he had come home, quiet, shut himself in the garage, barely spoke to anyone. She said he seemed different, like something inside him had cracked. I didn't respond. I knew that garage. It was where he used to tell me I wasn't cut out for business, where he'd sit with a beer in one hand and a rant about how this generation has no grit. I knew he had nothing left to say because he finally realized I didn't need to hear him anymore. I never denied what I did. She asked, and I told her, word for word. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just paused and said he didn't know. I told her he should have. That was the problem all along. He never wanted to know. A week later, my brother sent me a message. A single sentence. You could have handled it better. That was it. No call. No real conversation. Just judgment typed from a distance. I ignored it. He never once reached out when I slept on a floor, trying to keep my business alive with $20 in my account and a busted laptop. He wasn't there when I pitched to empty rooms or when I got laughed out of my first funding meeting. They all remembered the version of me that struggled. None of them knew the man I became. But they knew now. My sister reached out too, but her message was different. She asked to meet. She said she wanted to understand. So I agreed. We sat in a quiet restaurant, nothing too formal. She didn't dress like a corporate executive that day, no blazer, no posture. Just someone who finally saw me eye to eye. I didn't know you were doing all that, she said. You never asked. She didn't argue. She admitted it. She said the family had its stories, and I didn't fit in them. That I'd always been the one that didn't follow instructions, didn't color inside the lines. That dad wrote me off early, and the rest of them followed without question. Then you bought the company, she said, almost smiling, not out of mockery, but disbelief. Why? I needed to prove something, I said. Not to you. Not even to him. To myself. She nodded, then looked down. Do you think he deserved it? I didn't answer right away, because it wasn't about what he deserved. It was about the choices we all make. He made his. I made mine. And life caught up to both of us. She didn't bring it up again. She respected the silence after that. The months went by. I kept building. I sold one of my firms for 8 figures. The others grew under different managers. I moved cities, bought a new house, started looking for more ideas to chase. But part of me still remembered that garage, that table, that tone. The man who saw his son as a failure because he couldn't recognize ambition when it didn't look like his own. One evening, my mother called again. Her voice was heavier. She said he hadn't been well. He'd stopped applying for work, stopped fixing things around the house. He just sat most days, rereading old manuals and staring at the walls. She didn't ask me to visit. She just wanted me to know. I drove down 2 weeks later, quietly. I didn't call ahead. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The porch creaked when I stepped onto it. The door was unlocked, like always. My mother was in the kitchen. She looked tired, but surprised to see me. She said nothing, just hugged me and whispered, "He's in the garage." I walked there slowly. The door was open. He was seated at the same workbench. Tools scattered. A broken radio taken apart. He didn't look up when I entered. "You came," he said after a moment. "I did." He nodded. Still didn't look up. "You own the whole company?" "Majority share." "How long?" 3 years now." Another nod. "You knew I was applying?" "Yes." "And you let it happen?" "Yes." He didn't speak for a long time. I thought he wouldn't. But then he finally turned to me, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "I deserved that. I didn't respond. I was wrong about you." I let the silence hang. "I thought you needed to follow a certain path, that anything else was failure." "I built my own path," I said. "I know. And I missed it." His hands trembled slightly. I never saw it because I never looked. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the weight of years finally landing where they belonged. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't try to defend what he said. He simply accepted that he'd been wrong. I stood there for a while, looking at the man who had once towered over me. He looked older now, smaller, not just in size, but in presence. The garage was filled with dust, but the air between us had cleared. "I'm not coming back," I said. "I know. I'm not the same person. I can see that." And with that, I turned and left. No argument. No long goodbye. No apologies I didn't need. Just a quiet end to a story that had taken too long to finish. I drove back to the city with no music playing, no calls taken, no thoughts clinging. The past was behind me. The company was mine. My name was finally worth something, not to them, but to me.